Good day and greetings from the Great White North. My name is Prickly Poo and welcome to day 35 of a year of change. Today we're going to touch on something that we had talked about quite a while ago, and we sort of visited back and forth throughout the past few weeks, and that is cravings. I'm not just going to sort of regurgitate what we've done before. We've had some things that sort of concentrate on the food aspect of it. Like for sugar stuff, we did the dates, and for salt, we did pickles, and then for sour stuff, we did the grapes. And we'll continue to do those as we go along, but this is sort of more along the line of why we have the cravings and what we can do to help. It's not going to be perfect, but again, this atmosphere is one of trying to help and try to have practical aspects to it. So it's generally assumed that, and generally accepted, I should say, that when you have a craving for something, it's generally not the specific food that you're craving, so much as the content of it. For example, if you have a craving for a steak, then chances are your body's just craving iron. So you have the steak, which has iron in it, which generally alleviates that. If you have a craving for fatty foods, or creamy, sugary stuff, then chances are you're low on calcium. So you can have some sort of food that usually ends up having calcium in that'll alleviate it. If you have a craving for bananas, then it's probably potassium. It's simple stuff like that. Things that your body knows to sort of what foods will trigger that, what's going to give you what you need. And generally that's where the cravings come from. So if you have an odd craving for something, which is why pregnant women tend to have odd cravings from time to time, is that their body needs something and it knows that there's a specific type of food that will give them what they need. It's not necessarily the food itself, as much as the content of it. So if you're having a craving for a steak, a handful of peanuts will probably do the same thing, as odd as it sounds, because they have iron in them as well. Same thing if you're craving chips. The potatoes in there probably have a lot of starch and calcium and things like that, so believe it or not, yogurt will actually help alleviate that. But again, this isn't a matter of saying, well, if you have a craving for this, then have a rice stick. It's not. There are going to be some things that you're going to crave that you're going to want to have. And one of those, oddly enough, is something that our bodies may still be craving, but that we obviously aren't deficient in, and that is fat. We still have those cravings for the fatty foods. Even sugar, you can almost understand, because your body doesn't really store sugar itself. And sugar is sort of, oddly enough, it's addictive in that the more you eat, the more that your body needs it, or craves it, I should say. And that's been proven many, many times over. But in the vein of craving fatty foods, whether it's getting something deep fried or cheesecake or something like that, you would think for people that look like us that our bodies wouldn't be craving that, because we have more than enough fat stores that it can use in case it needs it. So it sort of begs the question, why do we still crave that? To answer that, we sort of have to do a bit of a history lesson. If you go back far enough, 500,000 years or so, when we were still just starting to sort of gather together, live in caves and things like that, we were still hunter-gatherers. So if you can imagine someone 500,000 years ago, you haven't really eaten properly in a very long time. You're subsiding on nuts and berries and roots and things like that. Not just tree roots, like, carrots are technically a root, things like that. So, but you haven't had a very substantial meal, say, in a couple of weeks. And you haven't really had a very good meal in probably a day or two. And then all of a sudden, your hunting party comes back. And with them, they have in tow a huge animal, big enough to feed everyone there, to the point of being uncomfortably full, like a Thanksgiving dinner. Now, the elation that you would feel with that, not just of having that change, as we all know, getting that flavor fatigue where you're just eating nothing but grapefruit and rice cakes is horrible. Not only having that, but your body's reaction to it, getting a huge influx of protein, of iron, even the fat from the animal when they cook it, that your body's going to store so that you have those energy stores in place. All of that triggers a huge, huge response in your brain. and it releases chemicals in your brain that essentially are a reward for this. And over time, this has just been hot wired into our brains, and we still have it. So when you bite into a piece of cheesecake, or when you have a cookie or a donut, or eat into a really good slice of pizza, we've all had that moment when you just go, oh, this is so good. That feeling is that same reward center going off in your brain. So, and it's not a matter of processing the fat that your body is reacting to so much as just its presence. And they did a study 3 or 4 years ago where they showed that it isn't even really the fat that's doing it, because they measured this reward center of the brain that releases these chemicals when people have high fat and high sugar foods. And I don't know the group that they tested, but they found that if they had something like cheesecake, then the reward center would go off. It would release these chemicals. So that's what they were chasing. But what they also realized was there were certain types of fats, like fatty acids, which is still a fat, but it's sort of a healthy version. The reward center didn't go off for those. What's even odder is that the reward center did go off for synthetic materials, like silicone and paraffin wax. When they put that in their mouth, those centers went off again. So they thought, in this one study anyway, and there's probably more that go with it or against it or whatever, but it was the texture, the texture in your mouth that had that fatty creaminess, that is what triggered the sensation. That's what triggered the reward center of the brain to release the chemicals and give them that, for lack of a better term, that high from eating the fatty foods. And we still have that, which is why, even as fat as we are, we still crave that. Because it isn't a matter of our bodies saying we want fat, we want fat. It's we want that reward center going off as much as possible. They've done the same thing with rats in other studies where they would have them hit a button and it would release endorphins into their brain. And a rat will just keep hitting a button over and over and over and over again. It will stop eating, it will stop mating, it will stop everything just to keep triggering that until eventually it will just kill itself from malnutrition and exhaustion from hitting that button over and over. And it's really the same sort of, I don't know if it's the exact same reward center, but it's the same chemistry that goes along with any other addiction, whether it's smoking or, I'll say, cocaine for the time being. I know this isn't obviously as bad as cocaine or heroin or any of those, but work with me, people. I'm using it as an example. I don't want a bunch of, well, actually, that would be interesting, actually, to get a perspective from a bunch of cocaine addicts. I don't want a bunch of you in the comments field going, no, my brother had a heroin, and it's ridiculous that food is just as bad. I'm not saying it's just as bad. I'm just saying it is the same process that your brain goes through. You perform an action, you get a reward for it. And it's that reward that we're going after. Which is why we continually eat those fatty and sugary foods, so that we can get that reward center going off in our brain. And it's a subconscious thing. I've said it before, that for people like us, all food is comfort food. Whether it's getting a cookie that was homemade at home, as opposed to homemade in a restaurant, or getting something that you haven't had since you were a kid, and that feeling of nostalgia when you have it, finding a candy that you haven't purchased in 20 years. All those little things, they do sort of reinforce that, just like any other addiction. And I've said before that the problem that we have with food is more of an addiction. It's not a disease. It's not something that we just can't control. We do have a control over it. It's just learning how to deal with it. And I find for me that understanding the logic behind something helps me to deal with it a lot better. I can't talk at all today. I do apologize. Helps me to deal with it a lot better than not understanding. Just going through the motions and someone saying, well, you need to diet, so you need to just eat rice cakes and air and orange juice and then jog 5 miles a day. Having someone say that to me doesn't make sense. I need to know the reason why. And so if someone was to say, well, if you eat this, then this will happen, and here's why you need to cut this out, and here's why you need to add this, it's easier for me to understand. I can grasp it a little better, and for some odd reason, it makes it easier for me to accomplish. Obviously, I haven't accomplished very much because I'm still doing these, but I'm hoping that there are some of you out there that sort of feel the same way, that It's not a simple matter of saying, oh, I'm craving something like ice cream, so I need to do something. I need to distract myself from it. You are still going to have those cravings. That's never going to go away because we've trained ourselves over years and years and years that when our brain says, I want that reward center taken care of, we take care of it immediately. Almost to the point of, well, to many of us, it is at the point of overindulgence, which is why we are the way we are, which is what we're trying to stop. But obviously, we can't continue in that vein. We can't keep doing that. We can't keep rewarding ourselves for doing nothing. So this is why we've sort of done these little tweaks here and there, and also why it's been a very slow process. It's because trying to shock your system into quitting, just like quitting smoking cold turkey, it's really, really rough. And if you can make it as easy a process as possible, even if it takes a year or 2 years to get to where you want to be, if it's permanent at the end of it, then we're fine. And although many of you may not have seen much of a change, myself included, whether it's your jeans are still too tight and you haven't lost any inches off there, or a dress that you tried to get into, you still can't get into. If there are concrete changes like that you're just not seeing and you're getting frustrated, keep in mind that the weight loss is going to be sort of a byproduct of what we're doing. Look at how you've eaten this week. If you've stayed below your goals and the types of food that you've been eating, if you've changed those. And even if you take it throughout the entire week and look at the calorie count and the types of food, if you've eaten more fruits and vegetables, if you've cut back on chips, if you've gone from the huge family-sized bag of chips that you've eaten every day, and some of us have been there, the great big bags of chips, even if you've gone from one of those to a regular bag that you find in a vending machine, but you're still eating it every day, that's still an improvement. So you should at least give yourself that. Not to pat you on the back for doing nothing or saying, oh, you're doing great when you aren't. But just recognize the fact that what you have done, we're at the end of 5 weeks. There has been a change. You may not feel it yet. You may not see it yet. I certainly don't. But it is happening slowly and but surely and sort of behind the scenes. So if you look at what you've eaten so far this week, go through your diary and let alone just the numbers, just the types of food that you've had, when you've eaten them, where you've sort of cut back. And then go back and look at the very first week that we did, when we weren't caring about points or numbers or content or anything. That first week when you just tracked just to get sort of your bearings as to what you were eating, the types of food, and how much you were eating. Look at those 2 weeks, and it's only been a month apart, but you will see a difference. And that's a significant difference, especially for someone that has gone through the same thing, year after year after year, either not making changes or trying to make changes and backsliding and going right back to where we were before. You have made a difference. And in a few weeks' time, when you go back again, there's going to be even a greater difference. And at the end of this, at the end of a year, when you look back 52 weeks and see how you used to eat compared to how you eat then and now, 52 weeks in the future, there's going to be a huge difference. And the weight loss may not come right away. Some of you may lose fat but gain muscle. Some of you might just maintain. Some of you, as you probably notice, some of you are going to have gained weight because it's a shock to your system. You're changing the way that you eat. You're changing the way that you think. You're changing the way that you react to stuff. So it's not going to be just, I'm going to drop the weight off and I'm going to keep it off forever. This is why we're doing this over such a long period of time. And I've had this conversation with you before, and I don't mean to repeat myself, which I tend to do. But just sort of keep things in perspective that 5 weeks ago, actually, let's go even 1 week before that. 6 weeks ago, before you even started watching these, you were not where you are now. That much is certain. Whether you've gone over 2 or 3 days a week in your calorie count, it doesn't matter. You've been tracking your food. You've been watching what you're eating. Maybe you've changed some of your dietary habits. Maybe you haven't. Maybe you're just exercising more, but you're sort of narrowing down a bit. You have made changes. And if you keep doing that, we have another 47 weeks ahead of us. Then over the long haul, when you look back, that change is going to be making a huge difference. And as I say, the weight loss is a byproduct. It's going to be secondary to what we're doing. Our goal at the end of the year is to change how we look at things and how we react to food so that we can get on course, so that we can start doing more and losing the weight and looking and feeling how we want to feel, get healthier, and in the long run, obviously, live a little bit longer, but with a higher quality of life. Longevity just doesn't equal quality of life. And that's something for another topic that we'll get into. Just because you're living to 100 doesn't mean that you had a great life. If you can live to 80 and enjoy yourself, that's much better than living to 100 and being miserable. But that's for another topic. But for now, again, you have made a significant change. And over the past few weeks, as tiny as they may be, in the long run, you are going to see a difference. You are going to start being able to fit into clothes you weren't able to fit in before. You're going to notice that you feel better, that you just overall, mentally and psychologically and physically, are in a better place than you were when you first started. And we are still going to have those moments when you're going to crave those fatty foods and you're going to indulge yourself. That's okay. The fact is that you're not to a stage where you're indulging it every single time like we have been. You're not just sitting and eating bags of chips and cookies and cakes and everything is bad for you and doing nothing. So you have made a bit of a difference. So you may not see it yet. Trust me, in the long run, you will see it. So tomorrow we're going to start in on week 6. So you're a month and a half in, actually, already. So bravo. For many of us, myself included, this is, again, sticking with something longer than I ever have before. So talking back and forth does help. As I'm recording this, there's, I think, 6 people that are watching off and on, but they're my friends, so they don't really count. But I still feel like I'm talking to a large number of people because I'm hoping that this is going to be something that's going to be around for a few years. So as people start joining up and watching more and the community grows and people are supporting each other back and forth, that there's always that sense that there's someone out there, that I'm talking to you, I'm talking to your friends. Maybe you're watching this with someone, that maybe you're watching this with your partner, so that you're doing this together so that you can lose weight at the same time, which is great because I never even thought of that until just now. So that you're not just sort of hiding back, and if you are doing this alone, that at least you've got someone here that you can talk to, whether it's someone in the comments or someone on the MyFitnessPal group, or if it's, even just back and forth with me, that there is something there that is going to help keep you on track and keep me on track so that we can do this whole year and get to where we want to be. But I've started repeating myself and I've started rambling, so I'm going to end this video here. So thank you very much for watching once again. If you liked it, please poke the like button for me. In the meantime, keep yourself warm and fuzzy, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.